Sophia had always been resilient, but lately, even her determination was wearing thin. At 19, she faced the world with Ethan in her arms. Now, with Ethan turning 6, his needs were growing, and so were the expenses. Unemployed and without options, she spent her nights holding back tears and her mornings searching for hope where none seemed to exist. But that day, something changed. On the small kitchen table, next to a stale loaf of bread, lay a piece of paper her neighbor had left earlier. Sophia picked up the ad with trembling hands, reading and rereading every word as if it were a golden ticket. Private caregiver for affluent clients, demanding work, excellent pay, requiring discretion and dedication. For a moment, her heart raced. What did demanding mean? Could someone like her, with a life full of struggles, even stand a chance? But the promise of a good salary meant a better school for Ethan, a home with space for him to play, and nights where she wouldn't have to choose between paying the electric bill or putting food on the table. Sophia took a deep breath. This could be the breakthrough she'd been waiting for, or the start of a challenge that would change everything. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the estate. The towering iron gates swung open, revealing a garden so immaculate it felt surreal. A housekeeper named Laura greeted her at the door with a polite smile. "Welcome. I'll take you to Mr. Thompson, but I should warn you, he's direct and expects a lot. Just be honest." Sophia nodded, her palms sweaty as she followed Laura through the quiet hallways. When Laura opened the office door, Sophia saw Daniel Thompson for the first time. He sat in a wheelchair, dressed impeccably in a suit, but what caught her attention were his eyes, cold, calculating, and almost challenging. "Are you the applicant?" he asked bluntly. "Yes, sir," Sophia replied, trying to sound confident. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Why do you want this job?" Sophia took a deep breath. "I'm a single mother. I want to secure a better future for my son, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Daniel was silent for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Then, with a quick motion, he turned his wheelchair. "Start tomorrow. Don't let me down." That night, as Sophia tucked Ethan into bed, she felt a mix of relief and unease. This job could change everything. But something about Daniel's gaze made her think there was more to this estate than met the eye. The next day, Sophia arrived for her first shift. Laura greeted her again, this time with less formality but the same efficiency. "Follow me. I'll explain your duties as we go." As they walked through the wide, silent hallways, Laura spoke clearly. "Mr. Thompson has a very specific routine. Your main responsibility will be assisting him with bathing and dressing. He prefers things to be quick and efficient. One important note, he doesn't like unnecessary small talk. Stay professional." Sophia swallowed hard. Laura's tone was reassuring, but it didn't erase Daniel's words from the day before. "Don't let me down." Those words echoed in her mind like a warning. In the master bathroom, Sophia noticed the assistive equipment tailored for Daniel. There were side rails, a special shower bench, and a small table filled with expensive-looking products. Before she could take it all in, the door opened and Daniel entered, expertly maneuvering his wheelchair. "Let's get started." "I don't have all day," he said curtly, not even glancing at her. "Yes, sir," Sophia replied quickly. She began adjusting the bench so he could transfer from the wheelchair. Despite her determination, she couldn't help but notice the scars on his hands as he gripped the rails tightly. He didn't ask for help, but his body told a story. Sophia stood nearby, ready to assist if needed. "Don't treat me like I'm helpless," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. "That's not what I'm doing," Sophia replied quickly, keeping her voice calm. "I just want to make sure you're safe." Daniel scoffed but didn't respond. The rest of the bath continued in awkward silence, broken only by the sound of running water. As she helped rinse his shoulders, Sophia noticed a deep, jagged scar running down his back. She hesitated for a moment, but decided not to ask questions. Not yet. After helping Daniel get dressed, Sophia began tidying up the bathroom. He watched her from the corner of his eye, as if trying to figure her out. "You seem to be handling this well," he remarked, his tone sounding more like a test than a compliment. "I've been through tougher things," Sophia replied honestly, but without elaborating. Daniel didn't press further. He simply turned his wheelchair toward the door and left the room without another word. The rest of the day was a mix of instructions from Laura and moments where Sophia had to interact directly with Daniel. He wasn't exactly rude, but there was something about his demeanor that made it clear he was always in control. Even so, Sophia noticed small details that contradicted his tough exterior. The way he gripped the armrests of his wheelchair when someone got too close, how he avoided eye contact whenever the conversation turned personal. At lunch, Sophia met Victoria for the first time. She entered the dining room with light steps, carrying an air of superiority. Her expensive dress, signature perfume, and icy gaze made it clear she wasn't someone easy to please. "So, you're the new caregiver," Victoria said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I'm Sophia," she replied, keeping her composure. Victoria didn't respond immediately. She let out a short laugh before turning to Daniel. "I hope you don't give her too much trouble. She seems delicate." Daniel didn't react, but Sophia noticed his jaw tighten slightly. The tension in the room was palpable. Victoria seemed to enjoy provoking, and Sophia realized she'd need to tread carefully around her. Later, while Sophia was tidying up the rooms, Ethan called from a neighbor's phone. His cheerful voice was the only bright spot in her tense day. "Mom, how was work?" "Is the house huge?" he asked excitedly. "It's different, sweetheart, but I'm okay. Did you eat properly with Maria?" "Yes, but I wish you were here." Sophia's heart ached, but she kept her voice light. "I do too, my love, but I'm doing this for us. Now make sure to go to bed early, okay?" After hanging up, Sophia stared at the phone for a few minutes. Working at the estate was a completely different world from what she was used to, and being away from Ethan made it even harder. At the end of the day, Laura stopped to talk to Sophia in the kitchen. "You did well today. Mr. Thompson didn't complain, which is a good sign." "He seems complicated," Sophia admitted. Laura let out a short laugh. "That's a compliment compared to how he was at the beginning. The accident changed everything. He lost more than just his mobility. He lost his trust in people." Before Sophia could ask more, Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway. He didn't say anything, but his presence seemed to fill the room. "I'll need you early tomorrow," he said, looking directly at Sophia. "Be on time." "Of course, sir," she replied, trying not to show her exhaustion. When he left, Laura patted Sophia's shoulder. "You'll be fine. He just needs time." The next morning started early. Sophia arrived at the estate before sunrise, meeting Laura in the kitchen as she prepared a hot cup of tea. "Are you getting used to the routine?" Laura asked, handing her a mug. "I'm learning, but he's complicated," Sophia said, taking a sip of tea while searching for the right word to describe Daniel. Laura laughed. "Complicated is the nicest term I've heard. But he wasn't always like this, not entirely." Before Sophia could ask more, a sharp sound echoed down the hall. Daniel was lightly tapping on the table in the next room, signaling he needed something. "Time to get started," Laura said, encouraging Sophia with a nod. Entering the living room, Sophia found Daniel staring out the window, his eyes fixed on the immaculate gardens. He seemed lost in thought, but the tension in his shoulders showed he was always on alert. "I'm ready to assist you, sir," Sophia said, keeping her tone neutral. Daniel turned his wheelchair toward her and raised an eyebrow. "Let's see how long you can say that with confidence." Sophia ignored the comment, walking to the kitchen to fetch his morning medications. On her way, she sensed someone behind her. Turning around, she found Victoria standing in the hallway. "Good morning," Victoria said with a smile that dripped with sarcasm. "I hope you're enjoying the job." "It's not for everyone. It's challenging but necessary," Sophia replied politely. Victoria stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. "You know you can be replaced at any moment. Don't forget that." The veiled threat hung in the air. Sophia stayed silent and returned to her task, feeling Victoria's gaze following her until she disappeared down the hall. The day carried on with routine tasks and the constant presence of Daniel, who seemed to test Sophia at every opportunity. During the bath, he broke the silence with an unexpected question. "Why are you really here?" Sophia paused for a moment. "I've told you before, I want to secure a better future for my son." Daniel let out a short, almost bitter laugh. It's always the same story. Someone's always doing something for someone else, but in the end, it's always for themselves. Sophia felt the coldness in his words, but didn't back down. Maybe it's hard for you to believe that, but not everyone is the same. Daniel stared at her for a moment before looking away. Sophia realized that behind his rigid demeanor, there was more than bitterness. There was pain, a story he guarded fiercely. Later, while tidying Daniel's room, Sophia came across a box of old photos. One photo caught her attention. Daniel was standing and smiling next to a woman she recognized as Victoria. They seemed happy, but something about her smile looked artificial, like it was only for the camera. Before she could put the photo back, Daniel appeared at the door. "Do you always go through other people's things?" "I was just—" Sophia began, but Daniel raised a hand, cutting her off. "It doesn't matter. You want to know what happened, don't you? Everyone does. They look at me and see a mystery waiting to be solved." Sophia hesitated. She hadn't meant to invade his privacy, but the accusation in his voice made her feel like she had crossed a line. "If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. You don't owe anyone an explanation," she said calmly, putting the photo back in the box. Daniel was silent for a moment before murmuring, "That photo was taken before the accident, before everything fell apart." He turned and left, leaving Sophia with more questions than answers. At lunchtime, Ethan called again. His cheerful voice was the highlight of Sophia's day. "Mom, have you seen the garden? Is it pretty?" "It's beautiful, sweetheart. You'd love it. Maybe one day I can take you here." Ethan giggled. "What about the man in the chair? Is he nice?" Sophia thought for a moment before answering. "He's different, but I'm learning how to manage." After hanging up, Sophia felt a wave of longing for Ethan. The job was demanding, but she reminded herself she was doing it for him. Later, while organizing the kitchen cabinets, Laura appeared with a package in her hands. "This was delivered for you." Sophia opened the package and found an anonymous note. The words were simple but filled with malice. "Watch your step." A chill ran down her spine. Who could have sent it? Victoria immediately came to mind, but Sophia knew she couldn't accuse anyone without proof. She showed the note to Laura, who looked visibly concerned. "That's strange. I'll look into it, but be careful, Sophia. There are a lot of people here who don't like change." At the end of the day, Sophia was exhausted but determined. During her final task, she saw Daniel sitting alone in the library, staring at an open book he didn't seem to be reading. "Do you need anything, sir?" He looked up at her, appearing more tired than usual. "You always ask that. Don't you get tired of trying to help?" "It's my job," Sophia replied, but her voice carried more sincerity than she intended. Daniel observed her for a moment before saying something that surprised her. "Maybe you're not like the others." Maybe. It was the first time Sophia saw something close to openness in him, and for the first time, she felt that maybe she could make a difference. The next day dawned gray, with a light rain covering the estate's gardens. Sophia was determined to set aside the mystery of the note and focus on her work. That morning, Daniel was more reserved than usual, though it didn't surprise her. He seemed like someone who lived surrounded by high walls, both physical and emotional. As she prepared the bathroom for Daniel's morning routine, she heard the sound of wheels approaching. He entered without a word, wearing his usual cold and watchful expression. "Good morning, sir," Sophia said, trying to lighten the mood. Daniel didn't respond, but gestured for her to begin. Sophia was already getting used to his silence. The routine seemed like any other until Sophia noticed something different. During the bath, Daniel avoided looking at her as usual, but his shoulders were less tense. He seemed more at ease, allowing her to work without his usual interruptions or sharp comments. "Sir," Sophia began, hesitating before continuing, "the weather today is perfect for a walk in the garden. Maybe we could—" "No," he cut her off, his voice as cold as the wind outside. Sophia sighed but didn't push further. Even so, there was something different about him. Small signs only someone close enough could notice. Later, while organizing Daniel's bedroom closet, Sophia found a dusty photo album. She hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. Inside were pictures of Daniel before the accident, standing, smiling, surrounded by friends and family. One photo in particular caught her attention. Daniel was hugging a woman with bright eyes, clearly happy. I remember that day. Daniel's voice startled her. He was standing at the door, watching her intently. Sophia swallowed hard, quickly putting the album back in its place. Sorry, I was just... Don't apologize, he interrupted. That was before, a time that no longer exists. Sophia noticed the melancholy in his words. Daniel seemed lost in memories he could no longer reach. You were happy, she said, almost without thinking. Daniel laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. Happiness is overrated. What matters is control. And that's what I've lost? Maybe not entirely, Sophia replied softly. You can still choose how to face things. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his wheelchair and left the room. At lunch, Sophia found Victoria at the table. She was as elegant as ever, but there was something tense in her posture. Are you enjoying the job, Sophia? Victoria asked, her tone polite but bordering on provoking. Yes, ma'am, Sophia replied, keeping her gaze fixed on her plate. Victoria leaned forward slightly. Daniel can be difficult. I hope you know how to handle that. He needs someone who understands their place. Sophia felt the sting in Victoria's words, but kept her posture. I do my best to fulfill my role. Victoria smiled, seemingly satisfied with the response, but Sophia felt her discomfort grow. Victoria's presence was a constant reminder that she needed to tread carefully. In the late afternoon, while cleaning the library, Sophia received another call from Ethan. His cheerful voice was a welcome relief in an otherwise heavy day. Mommy, I drew you today, Ethan said excitedly. Really? I can't wait to see it when I get home, Sophia replied, smiling. I love you, Mommy, he said, his sweet voice filling Sophia's heart with hope. I love you too, sweetheart. Be good for Maria. After hanging up, Sophia felt tears welling up. Ethan was her strength, but the weight of the distance between them seemed to grow heavier each day. Later, while preparing dinner, Daniel entered the kitchen. He rarely came there, and his presence caught Sophia off guard. You seem different today, he remarked, his tone almost casual. Different how? She asked, curious. Less submissive. That's good. Sophia chuckled softly. I'm not submissive. I just respect my work. Daniel looked at her for a moment, as if assessing every word she said. That's good too. Throughout the evening, Sophia noticed that Daniel seemed less resistant to interactions. He was still reserved, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. Perhaps he was beginning to trust her, even just a little. The next day, Sophia decided to try something new. During the usual morning bath, she asked, Have you ever considered spending time in the garden? Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're bringing that up again? I think it would be good. Fresh air can do wonders, she insisted, trying to sound casual. Daniel hesitated, but eventually gave a brief nod. Sophia seized the opportunity, and minutes later, they were in the garden surrounded by flowers and tall trees. Daniel seemed uncomfortable at first, but gradually, Sophia noticed him relax. The gentle breeze brushed against his face as he gazed at the cloudy sky. I used to come here often, Daniel admitted, breaking the silence. Before the accident, it was my favorite place. And it still can be, Sophia replied. Nothing has been completely taken from you. You just need to rediscover what makes you feel good. Daniel didn't reply, but his hands relaxed on the armrests of his wheelchair. Sophia knew that, although small, this moment was a victory. The morning was cold but clear, and Sophia started her day by adjusting the curtains in Daniel's room, letting sunlight flood the space. Daniel watched in silence, as he often did, his gaze distant, fixed on something beyond the windows. Good morning, sir, Sophia said, breaking the silence. Daniel looked up but didn't respond immediately. He seemed different, less rigid, as if the previous day's walk in the garden had broken an invisible barrier. Good morning, he finally replied, his tone neutral but lacking the usual coldness. Sophia saw this as a small step forward. She was learning that with Daniel, every step was subtle and full of meaning. As Sophia adjusted Daniel's equipment for his bath, she heard a soft noise coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was Laura, but when she opened the door, she found Ethan. Ethan? Sophia whispered, crouching down to her son's level. What are you doing here? Maria shouldn't have let you come on your own. I wanted to see you, Mommy, Ethan replied, holding a rolled-up drawing in his small hands. Sophia sighed, feeling a mix of exasperation and tenderness. She knew he missed her, but this wasn't the time or place. Before she could discreetly take Ethan out, Daniel appeared in the hallway. He looked at the boy with a curious expression but said nothing. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. "Are you the man in the chair?" Ethan asked directly, tilting his head with childlike curiosity. Daniel frowned slightly but replied, "I am." Ethan stepped closer, holding out his drawing. "I made this for my mom, but I think you might like it too." Sophia tried to intervene. "Ethan, that's not appropriate. Let's go." "Let him," Daniel interrupted, surprising Sophia. He took the drawing and looked at it silently. It was a simple sketch full of vibrant colors. Something about its innocence made the corners of Daniel's lips curve into an almost imperceptible smile. "Do you like to draw?" he asked Ethan. "Yes, when I grow up, I want to be an artist. My mom says I'm very creative," Ethan said enthusiastically. Daniel nodded slightly. "Maybe you have something many people lose as they grow older." Sophia, still trying to process what was happening, stayed silent, observing the unexpected interaction between the two. After Maria took Ethan back, Sophia returned to Daniel's room. He was holding the drawing on his lap, looking at it as if it were a rare artifact. "Your son is interesting," Daniel remarked. "He's my strength," Sophia replied. "Everything I do is for him." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he placed the drawing on the table next to his chair. "You should have brought him sooner. He has something most people here are missing." Sophia wasn't sure how to respond. It was the first time Daniel showed something close to vulnerability, and she didn't want to interrupt the moment. Later, while Sophia was preparing dinner, Victoria entered the kitchen. Her eyes immediately landed on Ethan's drawing, which Daniel had brought there. "What's this?" Victoria asked, picking up the paper with disdain. "It's just a drawing." "My son made it," Sophia replied, keeping her tone calm. Victoria let out a short laugh. Daniel does have a knack for surrounding himself with unusual people. Sophia felt her blood boil, but took a deep breath. She knew Victoria was provoking her, but she wouldn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to do," Sophia said, turning back to her tasks. Victoria stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. "You might think you're gaining ground here, but don't fool yourself. You're temporary. I, on the other hand, am permanent." Sophia didn't respond. She simply continued working, though Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Later that night, Sophia found Daniel in the library. He was silently flipping through a book, but he seemed distracted. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked. "Do you think people can change?" he asked without looking at her. Sophia hesitated. "Yes, I think they can, but it takes effort and not everyone is willing to try." Daniel finally looked up at her. "And what if they don't want to change? What if they think they've already lost everything that mattered?" Sophia stepped closer, sitting in the chair beside him. "Maybe they just need someone to show them there's still something worth fighting for." Daniel stayed silent, but something in his eyes shifted. It was as if, for the first time, he was considering the possibility that not everything was lost. The next morning, Sophia found an envelope on the kitchen counter. It was another note, but this time the message was more direct. "Leave while you still can." A chill ran down her spine. She showed the note to Laura, who looked visibly concerned. "This has gone too far. I'm going to talk to Daniel. He needs to know what's happening," Laura said. "No, I don't want to cause trouble," Sophia replied. "Whoever it is, I won't let them intimidate me. I'm here for my son, and I'm not giving up that easily." Laura nodded reluctantly, but Sophia knew the housekeeper shared her concerns. At the end of the day, Sophia found Daniel in the garden, a rare sight on his own. He was staring at the horizon, lost in thought. "Thank you for what you did yesterday," he said suddenly, without looking at her. "For what?" Sophia asked, confused. "For bringing your son. He reminded me of something I had forgotten." Sophia smiled softly. "And what was that?" Daniel finally looked at her. "That there's still beauty, even when everything seems lost." Sophia walked into the kitchen early the next morning and found Laura preparing coffee. Despite the housekeeper's calm demeanor, Sophia felt a growing heaviness in the estate's atmosphere. The note from the previous day was still on her mind, but she decided not to bring it up. There was work to be done. "Good morning," Laura said, handing Sophia a mug. "Good morning," Sophia replied, taking a sip of the hot coffee. Laura observed her for a moment before speaking. "You seem tense. Is something wrong?" Sophia hesitated. "It's nothing. Just my own worries." Laura didn't press further, but Sophia knew the housekeeper noticed more than she let on. Sophia spent the morning tidying Daniel's room. He seemed quieter than usual, something Sophia now recognized as a sign he was deep in thought. As she straightened his bed, he watched her for a few seconds before finally speaking. "Did you get another note?" Daniel asked, his tone direct and unexpected. Sophia froze for a moment and turned to face him. "How do you know about that?" Daniel shrugged. "Laura mentioned it to me. I thought you would have told me." Sophia sighed, feeling the weight of his gaze. "I didn't think it was relevant. It's just someone trying to scare me." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Do you think that's something you should ignore?" "I don't want to cause any trouble," Sophia replied firmly. Daniel chuckled softly, though there was no humor in his tone. "Trouble already exists in this house, Sophia, and you're not responsible for it." Sophia didn't know how to respond. It felt like Daniel was referring to more than just the note. At lunch, Victoria walked into the dining room with measured steps, holding an envelope. She cast a quick glance at Sophia before sitting beside Daniel and handing him the envelope with a forced smile. "Daniel, I brought some documents for you to sign. Just some adjustments to the property management." Daniel looked at the envelope, but didn't take it immediately. "Documents, Victoria? Now?" "It's important," she insisted, though her tone carried a hint of anxiety. From a distance, Sophia noticed Victoria's unease. Something about the interaction seemed off. Daniel finally took the envelope, but didn't open it. Instead, he set it aside and looked directly at Victoria. "Why don't we discuss this later? For now, I'd prefer to have lunch." Victoria smiled, but it was clear she wasn't pleased. Later, as Sophia prepared Daniel's afternoon tea, Ethan called again. Her son's cheerful voice was always a welcome relief amid the tension. "Mommy, today I made a drawing of you and the man in the chair," Ethan said excitedly. "Really? I can't wait to see it when I get home," Sophia replied with a smile. "Are you happy at work, Mommy?" Ethan asked, his voice full of innocence. Sophia hesitated. "I am, sweetheart. I'm doing this for us." After hanging up, Sophia felt a lump in her throat. Ethan was her strength, but she knew she had to shield him from the weight of her challenges. In the early afternoon, Sophia found Daniel in the library. He was examining the envelope Victoria had brought earlier, but seemed more lost in his thoughts than focused on the documents. "She's always trying to control everything," Daniel commented, more to himself than to Sophia. "Oh?" Sophia asked hesitantly. "Victoria," Daniel replied, his tone a mix of exhaustion and irritation. "She acts like she's helping, but she's only interested in what she can take from me." Sophia remained silent, but Daniel continued. Before the accident, I thought I understood people. I thought I knew who was loyal and who was just here for their own game. And now," Sophia asked gently, "now I see things for what they really are. The accident wasn't what broke me, Sophia. It was the people around me." Sophia felt the weight of his words. She could sense that beneath Daniel's bitterness lay a deep pain, and that he was beginning to trust her enough to reveal it. Later, while tidying the living room, Sophia heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Victoria entered abruptly, her eyes fixed on Sophia. "You have something that belongs to me," Victoria said, her voice low but laced with threat. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sophia replied, trying to stay calm. "Don't play innocent," Victoria continued. "If you think you can make a place for yourself here, you're mistaken. People like you don't belong in this world." Sophia felt her heart race, but didn't let Victoria see her insecurity. "I'm here to work, nothing more. I don't want trouble." Victoria stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. "Then stay away from Daniel. And one more thing, the next note you get might not be so friendly." Sophia felt a chill run through her, but she maintained her composure. Victoria turned and walked out of the room, leaving Sophia alone with the echo of her threats. At the end of the day, Sophia decided to tell Daniel everything. She knew she was dealing with something bigger than she could handle alone. She found him in the garden, where he seemed calm, gazing at the evening sky. "I need to talk to you," Sophia said, approaching him. Daniel looked at her, clearly noting the seriousness in her voice. "What is it?" Sophia hesitated for a moment before recounting everything, the notes, Victoria's threats, and their confrontation in the living room. Daniel listened in silence, but his expression hardened with each word. When she finished, he finally spoke. "Victoria has always been good at manipulating people. But with me, that ends now. What are you going to do?" Sophia asked, worried. Daniel looked at her, his voice filled with determination. "I'll handle my way. But know this, Sophia, while you're here, you're under my protection. Don't let Victoria intimidate you." Since her confrontation with Victoria the previous night, Sophia felt a heavy tension in the air. Every glance and movement seemed to carry more weight. She decided to follow her routine as usual, knowing Daniel was also aware of the situation. As she prepared Daniel's bath equipment, she noticed he was quieter than usual. It wasn't his usual cold silence, but something more reflective. "Are you all right, sir?" Sophia asked as she adjusted the shower bench. Daniel looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You always ask that, don't you?" "It's part of the job," she replied with a gentle smile. He chuckled briefly, but this time there was no irony in his laughter. "I'm thinking, have you ever believed you could do something impossible?" The question caught her off guard. Sophia thought for a moment before answering. "Yes, many times. And in some of those times, I actually did." Daniel nodded, as if absorbing her words. "Maybe I should try, too." That morning's bath was different. Daniel seemed more cooperative, allowing Sophia to assist him without his usual sharp remarks. When she finished, he looked at her in a way that made her pause. "Do you believe I could stand up one day?" he asked with a vulnerability Sophia had never seen before. "I believe you can do anything as long as you're willing to try," she replied sincerely. Daniel didn't respond, but his gaze lingered on her for a few moments before he turned his wheelchair and left the bathroom. Later that morning, Daniel asked Sophia to meet him in the physical therapy room, a space he rarely used. The room was equipped with parallel bars, weights, and other rehabilitation tools. "I want to try something," he said, positioning his wheelchair near the bars. Sophia was surprised but immediately moved closer, ready to assist. "Are you sure, sir? I don't want you to get hurt." "I'm already hurt," Daniel replied. "What more could happen?" He began positioning his hands on the bars, his arms trembling with the effort. Sophia stepped in, lightly supporting his back. Every movement seemed like a battle, but Daniel didn't give up. After several moments of intense effort, he managed to lift his torso slightly. It was brief, but it was enough for him to feel something different. "I felt it," he said, breathless. "For a moment, I felt it." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining. "That's amazing, sir. This is just the beginning." Daniel looked at her, his face marked by strain but also by a glimmer of hope. As Sophia helped him back into his wheelchair, Victoria entered the room, clearly irritated. "What's going on here?" she asked, crossing her arms. Daniel raised his eyes to her, his expression now firm. "I'm trying to take back what's mine, something you never believed I could do." Victoria scoffed, turning her attention to Sophia. "Is this your idea? Let me guess, you think you can save the world, don't you?" "This was Mr. Thompson's idea," Sophia replied calmly, "and he's making incredible progress." Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "Progress? He can't even stand on his own. This isn't progress, it's delusion." Daniel interrupted before Sophia could respond. "Enough, Victoria. I'm tired of hearing you tear everything down. You're not here to help me. You're here for yourself." Victoria remained silent for a moment, surprised by the firmness in Daniel's voice, but instead of backing down, she cast one final look of disdain before leaving the room. Later, as Sophia prepared lunch, Ethan called again. His cheerful voice was a balm after the tension of the morning. "Mommy, today I drew a picture of a strong man. It's you and the man in the chair together," Ethan said proudly. Sophia laughed. "Really? I can't wait to see it. Are you behaving?" "Yes, Mommy, but I miss you," he said in a softer tone. "I miss you too, my love, but we'll be together soon, I promise." After hanging up, Sophia felt tears well up in her eyes. Ethan was her strength, but each day apart felt harder than the last. In the afternoon, Sophia found Daniel in the garden. He seemed calmer, gazing at the horizon with a contemplative expression. "Thank you for what you did today," he said without looking at her. "You're the one who did it, sir," Sophia replied. Daniel chuckled lightly. "You have a gift, Sophia. You make people believe in themselves." "It's the least I can do," she said, sitting down beside him. Daniel was silent for a moment before speaking again. "Have you ever thought that maybe you're here for a bigger reason?" Sophia frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "Maybe you're not just here to work. Maybe it's something more." Sophia didn't know how to respond. There was something in Daniel's tone that made her think he was talking about something far deeper than just employment. At the end of the day, as Sophia finished her tasks, Laura approached her. "I heard what happened in the therapy room. Did Daniel really try to stand up?" Laura asked, visibly surprised. "Yes, and he managed for a moment," Sophia replied. Laura shook her head, clearly impressed. "He's never tried that before. I think you're really making a difference." Sophia smiled but said nothing. She knew she was only beginning to understand the impact she was having and that the journey was far from over. The morning began with heavy clouds in the sky, a sign of the tension building inside the estate. Sophia knew Victoria wouldn't take the confrontation from the previous day lightly, but she was determined to move forward. Daniel's progress was her priority, and she clung to each small victory as proof that it was all worth it. While preparing breakfast, Laura walked into the kitchen, holding an envelope with a worried expression. "Another note," Laura said, handing it to Sophia. Sophia opened the envelope carefully, and the short message sent a chill through her. "Leave before it's too late." Laura shook her head. "This is getting dangerous. You need to tell Mr. Thompson." Sophia hesitated but knew Laura was right. It was time to face the situation head-on. Later, Sophia found Daniel in the library as usual, flipping through a book that didn't seem to hold his attention. "Sir," she began, approaching with a note in hand. "We need to talk." Daniel looked at her, then at the note she handed him. His eyes narrowed as he read the words. "Victoria," he muttered, more to himself than to Sophia. "We don't know for sure that it's her," Sophia said, trying to stay calm. Daniel tossed the note onto the table. "We don't need to be sure. This is her style. Hints. Manipulation. She wants to control everything. But why? What does she gain from this?" Sophia asked. Daniel stared at her for a moment before answering. "Money, power, everything she's ever wanted, and everything she thinks she might lose." A chill ran down Sophia's spine. "What should we do?" Daniel gave a faint smile, but his eyes were cold. "Leave it to me. She's crossed the line." In the early afternoon, Daniel asked Sophia to join him in the physical therapy room. He seemed determined, as if the note had ignited a new fire within him. "Today we're trying again," he said, positioning his wheelchair beside the parallel bars. Sophia helped him prepare, watching the determination on his face. He placed his hands on the bars and began to lift himself. His arms trembled with effort, but he didn't give up. "You can do it, sir," Sophia encouraged, her voice calm but steady. Daniel managed to lift his body higher than before, his legs still immobile, but his torso supported by his arms. It was a small triumph, but the smile on his face showed that, to him, it meant much more. "I didn't think I could do that," he admitted, breathing heavily. "Now you know you can," Sophia replied, smiling. As she helped Daniel settle back into his wheelchair, Victoria entered the room, as if waiting for the perfect moment to interrupt. "More useless attempts," she remarked with a sarcastic smile. Daniel stared at her firmly. "If you think this is so pointless, why are you still here?" Victoria laughed, but the sound was far from pleasant. "I'm here to make sure you don't destroy yourself with these foolish ideas. Someone has to manage what you can't anymore." "Is that what you call managing?" Daniel countered, his voice full of frustration. "Manipulating? Sabotaging? Is that what you do?" Victoria crossed her arms, her smile fading. "I do what's necessary." Daniel took a deep breath, but his posture remained rigid. "Consider yourself warned, Victoria. I won't tolerate this behavior anymore." Victoria left the room without another word, but Sophia could tell the battle was far from over. Later in the afternoon, Sophia was in the kitchen when Ethan called again. His cheerful voice was a welcome relief after the day's tension. Mommy, I saw a rainbow today. Have you seen one there? Not today, but I hope to see one soon, Sophia replied, smiling. Ethan paused before asking, Are you okay, Mommy? You sound tired. I'm fine, my love. Just a little busy, but don't worry, I'm taking care of everything. After hanging up, Sophia felt the ache of missing him grow stronger. Ethan was her greatest motivation, but being away from him was a constant weight. Later that night, Daniel asked Sophia to meet him in the library again. He was more serious than usual, as if deep in thought. Sophia, he began, have you ever wondered why I'm still here? Why I keep trying? Because you believe there's still something worth reaching for, Sophia answered without hesitation. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe you're right. But until now, I thought I was doing it alone. Now, I'm starting to think I might need help. There's no shame in that, sir. We all need help sometimes, Sophia replied. Daniel looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. Have you ever thought that maybe it's not just about me? That maybe you're here for a bigger reason? Sophia didn't respond, but felt the weight of his words settle over her. The next morning, as Sophia prepared breakfast, Laura entered the kitchen holding an envelope. Daniel asked me to give this to you, Laura said with a subtle smile. Sophia opened the envelope and found a handwritten note. Asterisk, thank you for believing in me. Let's keep going. Asterisk, she smiled, feeling a wave of hope. Daniel was changing, and she knew that in some way she was part of that change. The day started peacefully, but Sophia knew the estate's calm was always deceptive. Daniel seemed more motivated after his small progress in the therapy room, and it affected the entire atmosphere. Even Laura mentioned how Daniel was less rigid in his interactions, something everyone noticed. As Sophia tidied the living room, she was startled by a loud noise coming from Daniel's office. She hesitated before approaching, and when she opened the door, found Daniel sitting in his wheelchair, staring furiously at a pile of papers on his desk. What happened, sir? Sophia asked cautiously. Daniel held up one of the documents, waving it in the air. Victoria, she's trying to take control of part of my properties. Sophia remained silent, her mind racing. She knew Victoria had ambitions, but hadn't imagined they went this far. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked hesitantly. Daniel sighed, placing the document back on the desk. I'm already handling it, but thank you for asking. Despite his firm response, Sophia could see the situation was affecting him more than he let on. At lunch, Victoria entered the dining room as always elegant and composed. She seemed oblivious to the tension hanging over the house. Daniel, have you reconsidered my proposal about the investments? She asked casually as she sat at the table. Daniel stared at her with a dangerously calm expression. No, and I suggest you stop trying to force your will. You won't win this battle. Victoria laughed softly, but there was a hint of nervousness in her voice. I only want what's best for you and for us. Sophia, serving the table, noticed the exchange of glances between them. Victoria seemed determined to maintain her facade, but Daniel was no longer willing to play her game. After lunch, Daniel asked Sophia to join him in the garden. The day was sunny, and he seemed eager to enjoy the outdoors. Do you think people can change? He asked suddenly, watching the flowers. Sophia thought for a moment before answering. I think they can, but it takes willingness and courage. Daniel nodded slowly. And what if they don't have that? What if they'd rather destroy everything than try to change? Sophia looked at him, realizing he was talking about Victoria. I think, in that case, change only happens when people lose control. Maybe that's what they need to see things differently. Daniel remained silent, but his hands tightened slightly on the armrests of his chair. Later, as Sophia cleaned the library, Ethan called again. He sounded more cheerful than usual, bringing a smile to her face. Mommy, today I played doctor with Maria. She said I'm great at taking care of people. You're great at everything, my love, Sophia replied, laughing. Ethan paused before asking, When can I visit you at the estate? I want to see the flowers you talked about. Soon, sweetheart. I promise we'll plan it, Sophia said, feeling her heart take. After hanging up, she stared at the phone for a few moments, trying to hold back her emotions. Ethan was her greatest motivation, but the distance was becoming harder to bear. Later that afternoon, Sophia found Laura in the kitchen. The housekeeper looked worried, and Sophia noticed she was holding an envelope. "I received this today. I think you need to see it," Laura said, handing the envelope to Sophia. When she opened it, Sophia found another threatening note. Asterisk, "You're digging your own grave. Leave before it's too late." Asterisk. A chill ran down Sophia's spine, but her determination only grew. She knew Victoria was behind it, but she refused to let it intimidate her. "I'm not going anywhere," Sophia said firmly, putting the note away. Laura nodded, but her expression remained concerned. "Be careful, Sophia. Victoria is dangerous." Later that evening, Daniel asked Sophia to meet him in the office. He was looking at the same pile of papers he had reviewed earlier, but his expression was now one of focus rather than anger. "You asked me earlier how you could help," he began as Sophia approached. "Yes, sir," she replied, waiting for him to continue. "Foster," Chloe began, approaching him cautiously. "I need to talk to you about something important." Arthur turned his wheelchair slightly to face her, his expression calm but attentive. "What is it, Chloe?" Chloe took a deep breath. "Lucy told me that Evelyn has been speaking with your lawyers. She's trying to challenge your ability to make decisions about your business. She's gathering support to undermine you." Arthur's jaw tightened, but he didn't seem surprised. "I expected as much. Evelyn doesn't give up easily, especially when she's cornered." "What are you going to do?" Chloe asked, her voice tinged with concern. Arthur leaned back in his wheelchair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've already taken steps to protect myself. My lawyers are loyal, and I've made sure to secure all necessary documentation to prove my competence. Evelyn's attempts will fail, but it's going to get messy before it's over." Chloe nodded, feeling a mix of relief and unease. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Arthur looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "Just keep doing what you've been doing. Your support means more than you realize." Chloe smiled faintly. "I'll do whatever I can, sir." The rest of the morning passed quietly, but the tension in the mansion was palpable. Evelyn avoided direct confrontation, but her presence lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Chloe focused on her tasks, determined to stay strong for Arthur and for herself. Later that afternoon, as Chloe was tidying the library, she heard raised voices coming from Arthur's office. She hesitated for a moment before deciding to investigate. As she approached the door, she could hear Evelyn's sharp tone. "You're making a mistake, Arthur. You think you can cut me out, but you'll regret it. I know things about you, things that could ruin you if they came to light." Arthur's voice was calm but firm. "Do your worst, Evelyn. I'm done playing your games. You've overstepped, and now you'll face the consequences." Chloe stepped into the room, her presence immediately drawing Evelyn's attention. Evelyn turned to her, her eyes blazing with anger. "This is your doing," she spat. "You've poisoned him against me." Chloe stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I haven't done anything but support Mr. Foster. If you've lost his trust, that's on you." Evelyn's face twisted with rage, but before she could respond, Arthur intervened. "Enough, Evelyn. This conversation is over. You're no longer welcome in this house. Leave now, or I'll have you removed." Evelyn stared at him, her expression a mix of shock and fury. For a moment, it seemed like she might argue further, but then she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Arthur let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. "That woman has been a thorn in my side for far too long." Chloe stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Are you okay, sir?" Arthur nodded, though he looked weary. "I will be. This isn't over yet, but it's a step in the right direction." Chloe hesitated before speaking again. "Sir, I know this is a difficult time, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever happens, I'll do everything I can to support you." Arthur looked at her, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Chloe. That means more to me than you know." The rest of the day passed quietly, but the tension in the mansion remained. Chloe could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she refused to let it break her. She focused on her work, determined to stay strong for Arthur and for herself. That evening, as Chloe was preparing to leave for the day, Arthur called her into his office. He was sitting at his desk, a stack of papers in front of him, but his expression was more relaxed than she had seen in days. "Chloe, I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done," he said, his voice sincere. "You've been a source of strength for me during a very difficult time." Chloe smiled faintly. "It's my job, sir. But more than that, I care about your well-being. I want to see you succeed." Arthur nodded, his gaze steady. "I know you do, and that's why I want to offer you something more. I'd like you to take on a larger role here, not just as my caregiver, but as someone I can trust to help me navigate the challenges ahead." Chloe's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like that." Arthur shook his head. "You're more qualified than you realize. You've shown me that you have the strength, the intelligence, and the compassion to handle whatever comes our way. I trust you, Chloe, and that's not something I say lightly." Chloe felt a swell of emotion, but she quickly composed herself. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best to live up to your trust." Arthur smiled faintly. "I know you will." As Chloe left the office that evening, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it head-on. She had found a place where she could make a difference, not just for Arthur, but for herself and for Lucas. The next morning, the mansion felt different. The tension was still there, but it was tempered by a sense of determination. Chloe arrived early, ready to tackle whatever the day might bring. As she entered the kitchen, she found Laura preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Laura greeted her with a warm smile. "You look like you're ready for anything." Chloe returned the smile. "I am. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." Laura nodded, her expression serious. "We will. And no matter what Evelyn tries, we'll make sure she doesn't succeed." Chloe felt a surge of gratitude for Laura's support. She knew that she wasn't alone in this fight, and that gave her the strength to keep going. As the day unfolded, Chloe focused on her tasks, but she also kept a close eye on Arthur. He seemed more determined than ever, and she could see the fire in his eyes as he worked to reclaim control of his life and his business. Later that afternoon, as Chloe was assisting Arthur with his physical therapy, he turned to her with a rare smile. "You know, Chloe, I think I'm starting to believe in myself again. And that's thanks to you." Chloe felt a swell of pride. "You've always had it in you, sir. I just helped you see it." Arthur nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe you're right. But either way, I'm grateful to have you by my side." Chloe smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come to the mansion looking for a job, but she had found so much more. She had found a purpose, a place where she could make a difference, and a man who had become more than just her employer. He had become a friend. As the sun set over the mansion, casting a warm golden glow over the gardens, Chloe felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it. She had found her strength, and she knew that no matter what came her way, she would persevere. For Chloe, the mansion was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of hope, of growth, and of new beginnings. And she was determined to make the most of it for herself, for Arthur, and for Lucas. Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. "You handled it well, sir. Evelyn may have been a challenge, but you stood your ground." Arthur turned to her, his expression softening. "I couldn't have done it without your support, Sophia. You've been a constant source of strength for me." Sophia smiled faintly. "I'm just doing my job, sir. But I'm glad I could help." Arthur shook his head. "It's more than that. You've shown me that there's still hope, even when things seem impossible. For that, I'll always be grateful." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me." The two of them sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. The garden, once a place of tension and unease, now felt like a sanctuary. The next morning, the mansion felt different. The air was lighter, and the tension that had hung over the estate for so long seemed to have lifted. Sophia arrived early, ready to tackle the day with renewed energy. As she entered the kitchen, she found Laura preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Laura greeted her with a warm smile. "You look like you're ready for anything." Sophia returned the smile. "I am. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." Laura nodded, her expression serious. "We will. And no matter what Evelyn tries, we'll make sure she doesn't succeed." Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for Laura's support. She knew that she wasn't alone in this fight, and that gave her the strength to keep going. As the day unfolded, Sophia focused on her tasks, but she also kept a close eye on Arthur. He seemed more determined than ever, and she could see the fire in his eyes as he worked to reclaim control of his life and his business. Later that afternoon, as Sophia was assisting Arthur with his physical therapy, he turned to her with a rare smile. "You know, Sophia, I think I'm starting to believe in myself again. And that's thanks to you." Sophia felt a swell of pride. "You've always had it in you, sir. I just helped you see it." Arthur nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe you're right. But either way, I'm grateful to have you by my side." Sophia smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come to the mansion looking for a job, but she had found so much more. She had found a purpose, a place where she could make a difference, and a man who had become more than just her employer. He had become a friend. As the sun set over the mansion, casting a warm golden glow over the gardens, Sophia felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it. She had found her strength, and she knew that no matter what came her way, she would persevere. For Sophia, the mansion was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of hope, of growth, and of new beginnings, and she was determined to make the most of it for herself, for Arthur, and for Ethan. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the mansion early, ready to tackle the day. As she entered the kitchen, she found Laura preparing breakfast. "Good morning." Laura greeted her with a warm smile. "You look like you're ready for anything." Sophia returned the smile. "I am. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." Laura nodded, her expression serious. "We will. And no matter what Evelyn tries, we'll make sure she doesn't succeed." Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for Laura's support. She knew that she wasn't alone in this fight, and that gave her the strength to keep going. As the day unfolded, Sophia focused on her tasks, but she also kept a close eye on Arthur. He seemed more determined than ever, and she could see the fire in his eyes as he worked to reclaim control of his life and his business. Later that afternoon, as Sophia was assisting Arthur with his physical therapy, he turned to her with a rare smile. "You know, Sophia, I think I'm starting to believe in myself again. And that's thanks to you." Sophia felt a swell of pride. "You've always had it in you, sir. I just helped you see it." Arthur nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe you're right. But either way, I'm grateful to have you by my side." Sophia smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come to the mansion looking for a job, but she had found so much more. She had found a purpose, a place where she could make a difference, and a man who had become more than just her employer. He had become a friend. As the sun set over the mansion, casting a warm golden glow over the gardens, Sophia felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it. She had found her strength, and she knew that no matter what came her way, she would persevere. For Sophia, the mansion was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of hope, of growth, and of new beginnings. And she was determined to make the most of it for herself, for Arthur, and for Ethan. Sophia stood in the garden, the soft glow of the setting sun casting a warm light over the estate. The air was filled with laughter and the gentle hum of conversation as guests mingled, celebrating Arthur's remarkable recovery and the new chapter in their lives. Arthur, now walking with the aid of a cane, stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her arm. He looked at her with a softness in his eyes that she had come to cherish. "Sophia," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you've brought light into my life when everything was dark. You gave me reasons to believe again. And now, I want to ask if you would stay by my side, not just as my assistant, but as my wife." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. Before she could respond, Ethan ran up to them, wrapping his arms around both of them in a tight hug. "Now we're a real family," Ethan exclaimed, his voice filled with pure joy. Sophia laughed, the sound light and free, as she looked down at her son, and then back at Arthur. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll stay by your side. Always." The months that followed were filled with love, laughter, and a sense of peace that Sophia had never thought possible. The mansion, once a place of tension and loneliness, was now a home, a place where hope and happiness flourished. Arthur continued to make progress in his recovery, each day bringing new milestones. With Sophia and Ethan by his side, he found strength he didn't know he had. And Sophia, in turn, found a sense of belonging and purpose she had been searching for her entire life. Their wedding was a simple yet beautiful affair, held in the garden where so many pivotal moments had taken place. Ethan, beaming with pride, stood by their side as they exchanged vows, his infectious energy lighting up the day. As Arthur delivered his speech, his voice filled with gratitude and love, Sophia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come to the mansion looking for a job, but she had found so much more, a family, a home, and a love that had transformed her life. And so, the story of Sophia, Arthur, and Ethan became one of resilience, hope, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. The mansion, once a place of shadows, was now filled with light, and their journey was just beginning. What did you think of Sophia and Ethan's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And don't forget to check out more emotional stories by clicking here on the end screen. ****.